Vi är spelskaparna.
Welcome to Spelskaparna, the podcast about the people behind the games. Today's guest is Joonas Turner, who, from what I've heard, have made sound effects and music for over 100 games. Badland, Nuclear Throne, Downwell are some of them, but as you've heard, it's plenty of games. Welcome.
Thank you.
And today we also have Gustav with us, who is one of the two editors of Spelskaparna. And he not only edits podcasts, he also makes his own sound effects. And I asked him to join today because I think his perspective could add value to this conversation. Welcome, Gustav.
Thank you.
So, Joonas, is it true that you have made sound effects and music for over 100 games?
Potentially. I stopped counting a few years ago already. I don't know, but when I kind of kept some kind of a count, it was at least over 70, and that was years ago. It's not like a thing like, hey, I worked on over X amount of games. It's just going through invoice lists and stuff. And I'm like, God damn, there's a lot of these.
That's crazy amounts. But that makes me wonder, how did it all start? What was the first game you made any sound to?
So I'll actually jump way back. When I kind of started to get interested in sound, I made music with softwares called trackers, and then eventually I got into recording with a hard drive or a CD recorder thing. And then I kind of got hooked into sound. I got a laptop and a sound card for myself as a teen, late teens, and started making my own music and stuff. But sound effects came later. I did a bunch of live mixing for bands, played in bands, recorded bands, mixed bands and stuff. So it's very music orientated. Until I got into a school in my 20s. I got into a sound school, or a school for media, but our emphasis was in movie sounds, or sound for moving pictures. And over there I realized, wow, making sound effects is great. And at the same time I started making my own games more as a hobby.
Like programming them, or?
Well, programming is a very high term for what I did. I used a lot of drag and dropping. So you could just drag programming blocks and things happen. And one of my friends that I learned through music stuff lived nearby. And this person is Yukio Kallio, who makes music for games as a living these days as well. I kind of saw through Facebook, I think, or something like that he makes his own games. I was like, God damn, I want to get into that. And I contacted him and he's like, yeah, I live right nearby. And I'm like, wow. I started meeting with him and he showed me how Game Maker works. Then I just started making my own small games. And when it came to hey, I need to make sounds, where do I find sounds? And that's when I realized, wait, why am I searching for sounds? Why don't I just try and make them myself? So I started making sounds for games while I studied sound for movie stuff. And these two worlds collided perfectly. I was like, wow, this is fun. This is what I want to do. And I realized that my interest wasn't in movies anymore. It was definitely towards video game stuff. So all of my school assignments, I would do these kind of mini video game experiments and stuff. Or audiobooks, stories with sound effects and stuff. And during the end of my studies, Yukio asked me to join this local game developer meetup evening thingy called Indie Beer, which is hosted by Petri Purho, the person behind games like Noita, Crane Physics, and so on and so on. So I went to the meetup, I got to meet people, and I was like, definitely video games. I love this stuff. This is cool. Talking to other like-minded people, hearing kind of more in-depth things about video games. Then I started doing game jams. And that's where kind of most of my video game stuff comes from. It was just working on game jam games and stuff. But I was maybe 5 indie beers deep or so, something like that. A few months of going to indie beer, Petri came to me and he's like, hey, these guys are looking for someone to make sounds for their game. And I was like, yeah, I'm down, let's go. So I went to talk with them and they were like, hey, come to our office someday and check out our game and let's see what you think about it. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. This is amazing. I wasn't even out of school properly yet. I was still at school and I already going to check on a game. So I went in and they were the Frogmind people. Johannes Vuorinen and Johanna Myllys. So I went over, and the game that they were making was Badland, the first Badland installment.
Ah.
I was looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% into this. And I did a small demo for their webpage, actually. They showed me a webpage. They're like, can you make sounds as a demo for a webpage? And I did that, and we ended up working together. And that game was such a study for me. It's full of physics stuff. We had like sound engine, like we were using Fmod Designer and doing like very kind of advanced stuff in it already. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of going over my head, but at the same time not. I kind of understand the basics of what sound effects are, how they work and stuff, and then just kind of deep diving into Fmod, going through that whole like audio middleware stuff. Like, how do the sounds actually work in the game with this piece of software? And jumped into it very heavy. The game turned out fine, and here I am.
Cool. So Badland was basically your first
commercial game.
Yeah. And that became such a great hit. When you made it, did you think it would be so big?
No idea. Like, when I initially jumped into it, I was just really excited to be working on something and actually playing it on my phone, like a development build. I was just like, wow, this is the future. And then during development, it actually won some awards at some events. I can't remember exactly. And I mean, by then I was like, wow, this is incredible.
And that was basically your learning experience as well then? I mean, apart from learning in school to do movie music and...
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that's different with game music and sounds from like movies...
Linear media, yeah.
Exactly. That takes quite a lot of effort to learn that stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had already kind of made sounds for my own games, but that's a different thing than making sounds for a commercial thing. And I had done some game jams and stuff, so I wasn't like 100% new, but I was still a bit, what's the term in English, like green to the whole thing. But then working on Badland, it was just, I mean, that's kind of my first foray into actually looking at a game and then starting to kind of design sounds, because I felt like that was the easiest way to me to approach a game. Just look at what happens in the game, list everything down on a piece of paper, like, okay, the player hits that thing, maybe that should make a sound. Then I realized, wait, I can't just make sounds for every single object. What if I make sounds for materials? So player hits metal, player hits wood, player hits stone, and stuff like that. So I started making kind of these sound bank lists for myself. So I started making material sounds, and I was like, wait a minute, but if you hit something harder, it makes a different sound than if you hit it kind of softer. So I started recording me hitting rocks like quiet, a bit louder and louder. And then I would just cut those, and it was like a straight deep dive into kind of physics sounds, and it was great. I learned so much from working on that.
You also mentioned that this was your first go at a middleware.
Yeah.
What is a middleware? Can you explain that just briefly?
Yeah, so for this example, we have a person making sounds, then you have the video game. So the middleware is a piece of software between the creator of sounds and the game, where I can put sounds and create these things called events. So let's say having separate rock hit sounds, like hitting rock or stone. I would have like a small impact, medium impact, and large impact. I could create those sounds, put them in behind a parameter in Fmod, which is the middleware here. And I can kind of tell Fmod, okay, if parameter is 0.5, play a medium hit sound. If it's 0.3, play a light hit sound, and so on. So I can kind of do light programming, in a sense, in the middleware that the programmer then can implement into the game. Just makes the process more smoother, so to say.
And the stuff you talked about that you were doing, is that called like Foley artist? What's the term?
Yeah, well, I would just say sound design, and yeah, sound design is what I use. It's like Foley, it's a bit misleading, but it's a word that's taken its own evolution, clearly. So like Foley actually means doing sounds in synchronization to a picture. So, you know, in movies, when someone runs up the stairs, that's what the Foley artist does. It looks, okay, I'm running upstairs and he runs like da-da-da-da-da on the same rhythm and velocity as in the picture in the movie. But what I'm doing is more creating like separate sound effects and not really working on sync with a picture.
Ah, got it. I've always thought it was like when you were making the sounds, like recording them yourselves and then editing them.
Yeah, that's pretty much the modern version of the word. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm gonna take that with me, the original term, because I understand the difference. But anyways, how come you ended up recording your own stuff instead of maybe going to some digital library and cutting together already recorded sounds and doing stuff with that?
I mean, I still use libraries as well in parallel a bunch, but I don't know. To me, it's more interesting to record stuff yourself. I mean, I have kind of multiple answers for this question. So one thing, being a student, it was way cheaper to do sounds myself. I didn't need to buy like a library that costs like 2,000 euros or anything like that. I could just make them myself. I can make them essentially for free. But also, it's just more fun. It's a bit like, imagine you have like a rock band or something, and instead of the guitar player playing the music, like the guitar riffs or something, you would just take a library and like, hey, this is the same riff, but just from a library. It's not the same thing for me personally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I enjoy that. And it's just fun. It's fun kind of listening to stuff. Because like with the movie school stuff, I would kind of grow this ear of listening to sounds. Because I did like Foley, like the literal meaning of the word Foley stuff for movies. I enjoyed that a lot. And that was, making sounds yourself.
Yeah.
On top of the picture that you see. And that was just, there's something interesting about that. It's somehow real, and then there's this small sense of pride that, hey, I made this. Like, this sound is by me. I can tell you the exact steps I did to replicate the same thing. It's interesting.
And sometimes it's a bit faster also. You get to the
Yes.
point quicker because you know what kind of sound you want and you can just find it right away, or experiment until you find the sound that you want instead of going through endless of libraries.
Yeah, exactly. And you get more variations. There's more bang for the buck, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it sounds more motivating as well. Like if you create your own stuff, then you're more motivated to do something really good rather than just taking something that is already finished.
Yeah, there's like a sense of skill and artistry there that I enjoy personally. I mean, it's a bit like drawing. You can take pictures from Google and cut together a cool picture. Which, I mean, that's cool stuff too. But if someone actually draws a castle and you're like, God damn, that's a castle. Like, it's a different thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard that you have a lot of stuff around you where you're sitting right now that you can use to make your own sound effects, basically.
Yes.
Could you maybe show our ears some of the stuff you have around you?
Yeah, so I have a workroom which I built so that I can record and perform sounds here. I have like an isolation booth where my computer is. This just makes life fun. So I have a bunch of literal junk next to me, and I have them in different boxes. Like I have a box full of metal stuff. So here is a box just full of metal junk. Let's pick some of them. Here I have a door handle. From our previous studio that we were in, there was like an old door going to the rubbish bin, and I actually took the lock part of the handle out of it. So this makes cool weapon reloading and weapon handling sounds, or anything for like mechas or whatever, robots and stuff. So this is like a door handle. This is like, let's say, in the video games we have a lot of very violent shooty stuff. Action games, and like imagine like putting bullets into a weapon, like reloading it.
It sounds great.
What else? So let me put this box down.
It's so cool how stuff that's really not what you think it is, how you can make it into something when it's out of context. Like it sounds like a weapon reloading, but it's actually just a door
handle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially younger, I used to play a lot of figurine games like Warhammer or whatever, Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. And when I would cheat, my friend would hit me in the fingers with a with the ruler, and that makes a cool kind of like, in kung fu movies, let's say you are like hitting, it's like so. Oh, He's doing the impossible attack where you swing both of your arms at the same time.
Is that a ruler? Is that what we're hearing?
Yep. So that's a ruler. Perfect for...
I would have never guessed it.
So what else?
So are you like always listening for sounds?
Yes.
So in normal day, you would recognize something. Oh, this sounds cool. I'll grab this.
Yeah. When I studied, and before actually studying, I started, I would say it's almost like an acquired skill. You have to kind of practice it. But then at some point, like after you practiced it enough, just to kind of... Actually, I'm going to give a quick example. I was designing a sound for a game called Nuclear Throne. There's this weapon called the plasma gun, which shoots this big ball of like green plasma. And I saw it and I was like, I don't know, how do I make the sounds for this? I tried like a million synthesizer sounds and I was just kind of not feeling it. And I went and cleaned the dishes. So I put the rubber thing where the water goes down. I put that and I washed the dishes and I took it out. And the water goes like that. I was like, woo, that's the sound. Like immediately just clicked, like that's the plasma gun sound. So I'd fill up the water again, take a microphone and record just that. And that became the plasma gun sound.
That's so cool.
And when you have that, like how much more work is it to it then? I mean, when you have the raw sound?
It depends. Sometimes the raw sound also depends how it's recorded. Is there background noise and all that kind of stuff? But sometimes, especially these days, because I've kind of built my whole setup around kind of creating pretty much close to final sounds, unless they need like radical editing. But I mean, sometimes it might take a lot of editing. Sometimes a minuscule amount of editing. Like recording outdoors. If you record something outdoors, there might be wind, airplane, car, birds, an insect, whatever, obstructing the sound. So you have to kind of edit those out. Or sometimes some of the best sounds are when you have recorded something and just start like stretching the sound. So instead of being like, you stretch it like, and you pick the cool part from the part out of that sound. And it's, every sound is different.
Do you remember what happened with the plasma gun sound after that? So did you put in more layers? Did you time stretch? Do you remember what you did with it?
Maybe. This was many, many years ago. I believe I put like distortion into it a bunch, and I definitely stretched it a bunch. And also in Nuclear Throne, I kind of, how would I explain this? So with each gun in Nuclear Throne, I would add just a small sound, which would kind of, that small, very quick sound had like the bass in it, like the sense of weight in it. So I'd always put that on front of every single gun in the game. And I would adjust the bass and volume of that to give more or less punch for a weapon. Like that, it was easy to do like plasma gun and heavy plasma gun. So plasma gun is just like, and then heavy plasma gun would be like, it was kind of easy to manipulate the sense of weight. Other than that, maybe quick delay stuff. It's like if you have an effect called delay, like bum, 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 like echo kind of a thing. If you put that really fast times, you get something called car plus strong effect, which makes the delay kind of make a tone. So if you have a delay time really fast and you crank the feedback up, it'll be like kind of a sound. So I think I used a bit of that as well in it. So that sound is definitely a product of layers, having a bunch of layers working together.
Yeah, cool.
Do you have any more junk around you?
Yeah, sure thing. Let's see. This is a movie classic. When, let's say, you had the valiant knight coming to the battlefield and they take their sword out of the sheath. It's usually, in real life, if you pull a sword out of a sheath or whatever you call it. I feel like a rude person saying shit all the time. But so you pull the sword, it doesn't definitely make a shing sound in real life. It's just... But... Incidentally, I have some rusty stuff here. I have a rusty saw and something spiky looking. I don't even know the English word for this. So let's see how these sound. So yeah, that's pretty much for like most, like when attacking with swords or whatever, I would just grab these, and there's so many ways you can manipulate this. Or change it other way around, this object doing this. It's fun.
Yeah.
What else? Let's see. Rummaging through equipment.
Could you pick something that me and Gustav could guess?
Oh, yes. Okay. Should I tell you what I'm doing, let's say, in a video game? To give more context, maybe. I don't know. Well, let's do the sound.
Okay, it sounds like you're walking on a high grass or something, or maybe on leaves.
I might actually know what this is.
Ooh.
If it's the classic walking on grass sound, maybe it's like magnetic tape.
Ooh, that's completely right.
Cool.
Nice, Gustav. Nice.
Vinyl tape, exactly.
But it sounded like grass. I mean, it.
Yeah, it really does.
Cool.
Yeah, and actually, I'm not going to do this now, but I mean, I live in Finland. I don't really need to fake snow, but it's really cold to record outside. So there's a trick for recording snow indoors that doesn't melt. So you take like a cloth bag and you put potato starch in it, and then you tie the bag and you manipulate, you kind of handle that, and it sounds like snow. And in America, you would use cornstarch. And here, potato starch is cheaper than cornstarch. In America, I believe cornstarch is cheaper than potato starch. Random info.
But maybe American snow sounds different than Swedish or Finnish snow. So
It does. It's made of corn. We are made of potato.
Yeah.
What else? Let's see. Maybe wings. So let's see if this works right now.
Oh yeah.
So let's say we have a dragon. So that's just a piece of cloth that I'm stretching and kind of doing a wing-like motion.
One interesting thing is that I'm looking at the recording as we're talking now, and actually the sound waves kind of looked like wings flying. Actually, even on the graphic.
What about birds flying that way, like a flock of birds?
Yeah. What is that? I mean, it sounds like a flock of birds, but what is it? What's that?
It's a plastic bag.
Oh god. Sounds like a fun line of work you have there, Joonas.
Yeah, it's just accumulated junk that I record, and I fool the world that it's something else.
I was thinking maybe we should listen to sound effects that you have recorded and talk about them.
Sure thing.
Perhaps you have stuff around you that you have used to make the sounds. I don't know. One game that you worked on is Atomic Crops.
Yes.
And what game is that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, Atomic Crops, it's a game made by Birdbath Games, and me and Toby Dixon on graphics. I did the sounds and music for this game, and and the game's published by a Swedish publisher called Raw Fury.
Oh, yeah.
So with this game, it's a post-apocalyptic farming simulator meets a roguelike action game. And it's a fun game where you farm and you shoot mutants. For that game, when I saw the graphics, I thought about, like every game that I start, I look at the game and I come up with a design. I actually write a design on usually pen and paper because I like physical medium because I'm like I am. So I write a bunch of stuff. I draw pictures and stuff. And for Atomic Crops, I want the game to be very organic and acoustic. Like the sound effects I wanted to make completely myself. And do you know like old Disney movies where they kind of made sounds kind of in a fun way? Like you would hear like kind of stuff. so on and so on. Like they would like hit a metal thing and it makes a blum, blum, blum sound. I kind of wanted to do that thing with Atomic Crops. So I would like build a bunch of random sound sources that would record. And same with the music. I want the music to be all acoustic. There's no digital or electronic instruments except for 2 songs, but they are kind of side things. But like the whole music is all acoustic. And I would use stuff for like reverbs and stuff. I would use like ventilation pipes. I would gather a bunch of ventilation pipes, play something through them, and it would come out like or reverberate it and stuff.
So you put like a microphone in the other end of the tube and play the sound. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And you play like a trumpet through that. It sounds weirdly reverberated. So kind of creating rooms inside rooms, kind of a concept. But yeah, that was super fun. So yeah, that's Atomic Crops.
And you've had like a theme that you've used to come up with your own languages as well for sound effects.
Yeah.
And that was part of Atomic Crops, right?
Yeah, so I wrote this spoken and written language for Atomic Crops that the mutant inhabitants speak in the game. And I did that with the music and sounds, and we incorporated that with the graphics a bit too. So it kind of ties everything nicely together. So kind of everything is in the same world. And that was fun and interesting.
We can listen to a few seconds from this and then we can talk about what we hear.
Sure.
Okay. When I heard that the first time, I was thinking, what language is this?
Yeah.
How did you design that? Like, what does it consist of?
So it's a very dumb syllable system. No, syllable system I did for another game. So in Nuclear Throne, we also have a written and spoken language, which is a syllable system. But for this game, I just wrote a bunch of words that you could tie together to create different meanings. So like, how did that song go? So gubba, no gubba. So gubba is like you give, and no gubba is I give. Guru guru gon is like, oh man, I can't remember. I don't have the language sheet with me. Oh, yeah. But yeah, it means something. It's like a Christmas song. That's a Christmas song. Like, I give you presents, you give me presents. Ha 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 ha. And then in the end, there's like another singing part where they go like, hey, enemy, go away. We ain't giving you our treasure away. I had the words, I wrote like this dictionary format. When I say that, it sounds more grandiose than it is. It's a piece of paper where there's random words that just sound funny. And because I had like, let's say like gubba, and that would be like give. And it's very functional language. And I would just like go, okay, it's Christmas. What would you sing? Like, hey, I give you something, you give me something, like presents. And I would just go, okay, what's give? That's gubba. And then what would sound funny and what would work with the music sound like so gubba, no gubba, gudu gudu gon, ha ha ha.
I really like it.
Thanks.
The mutants in the game, are they speaking this language also?
Yeah, sadly, in the final version, we don't have that many speaking mutants. Originally, we were planning on more of that stuff, but then, like gameplay purposes, it didn't really make sense. So we cut a lot of that work out, but but I kept it in here and there. For instance, in the game, you have these powerful skills called tractors. Of course, farming game tractors. So you have a cooldown on them. It's like an airstrike kind of a thing. So you call it and the tractor falls from the sky. Like Titans in Titanfall. So I have this small like radio voice. And it kind of lets you know, hey, your tractor is ready. But I'm using the language for the UI sound there. So it's like small things like that.
So I was thinking maybe we can play some sound effects from this game as well. They're very short, so we'll see how much we understand, but we'll see here. So this is the first one.
Opening a chest.
Opening a chest.
That was the ants. So you have these builder ants with which you can, you have like this base. You can unlock stuff for the base. So that's like an ant unlocking something.
And what is the actual sound?
Can you play it again? So you can hear these musical instruments, xylophone, and then doom is like a shaman drum or witch drum, as we call it in Finnish. And then the kind of the bug-like sound, that's actually a bottle top, like the cork of the bottle or whatever you call it. Like when you open the thing from a bottle. It's that, but it's for like a fire petrol kind of a bottle. And it makes this weird insect-like sound.
If we break it down, what do each sound contribute to the whole, so to speak?
So the boom sound is just like, hey, I picked up something. When I design sounds for games, I want the sounds to have a function. I want them to give something to the actual gameplay and the player, like pressing a button. I want that to feel like something. So the boom is for the button press. The is kind of like, hey, I got something. It's like a hopeful kind of a sound, like yeah, I unlocked something. And the sound is the ants making a sound.
Yeah, let's try another one.
So that's the very basic first rifle you have in the game, and you shoot. It has to be somewhat powerful, but not powerful enough. So that's kind of the middle ground of like powerful, but not too powerful. It shoots these small pea-like things.
Yeah, I want to listen to the once more. Yeah, for me, that's the game sound for a rifle. But what is it? What's the recorded sound?
It's a lot of sounds. This is going to be a shameless plug. I have a video on YouTube where I show briefly kind of the sound and music creation of atomic crops. So if you just write making of sound and music of atomic crops, you should find it. So that's me hitting a box with a mallet, I think. And maybe me kicking a box, and maybe, if I remember correct, slightly, I also recorded like actual guns, so maybe there's a bit of gun sound in it as well.
I've seen the video already, and I really recommend everyone go watch it because it's very entertaining.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's... Oh my god.
Woo! So that's a tractor hitting the ground. Actually, I think that's a computer case. Me hitting a computer case on the ground, kicking a box probably, and then there's a boop boop, like a beep beep, a horn sound from a bicycle, but that's pitched down.
Got it. We have one more from Atomic Crops.
Oh. So in the game you have daytime when you explore and nighttime when you defend the farm. And that's an indicator to know that day is changing to night.
Like many people right now, I've been watching Squid Game. I don't know what it is, but this sound reminded me of a sound they have in that series, which is also about like now we're entering a game or something like that. We are going from something a bit pleasant to something a bit unpleasant.
Yeah, it's usually actually a lot of things use that music, orchestral music especially. It's like a cymbal hit, like kind of raising up to that.
I haven't worked that much with sound effects, but I have consumed a lot, of course. And it seems like a lot of things you subconsciously react to in some way, but you don't know it. Like it's like a passive language you have, but something that you, as a designer, kind of...
Yeah, tap into. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's... for most humans or animals in general, but especially humans now, we listen to stuff all the time. It's something we can't really switch off. And if we do, it feels very unnatural to us. Because constantly we hear something. Even when we are sleeping, we are listening to stuff. Like if you hear someone cough when you're sleeping, you're like, oh, who's that? We are kind of wired like that. So sound is something which also makes it very hard. Because like sometimes you might know, like let's say I work with a game designer and they're like trying to explain that something to me, like that certain feeling, and I can kind of see the frustration because they're like, you know, that it kind of goes up and it does the thing and that thing, and I'm listening to them like, yeah, what are you talking about? but then you just have to kind of listen and be like, okay, when does this sound happen in, let's say, real life, or when have you heard this in movies, and kind of decipher the code, and then eventually you hopefully get it. But, you know, sound is just something very inherent to us. When we walk outside, we can hear a car behind us. We know, okay, there's a car. We didn't see it, we heard it. There's a lot of small things like that that you can use in video games. Like, let's say you play an action game and you're low in health. You can just like add a bit of like heartbeat, like kind of a sound. And you know that, hey, something's not good. Like you might not even necessarily see it, but you hear it and you know something's happening. So you can kind of use that to your advantage a bunch.
Yeah. In horror games, it seems like many horror games wouldn't work at all if you turned off the sounds. They wouldn't be scary.
Yeah. Most of the games I work on are action games, like shooting, fighting, whatever. It's sometimes nice to think of stuff like, let's say, a football game. Your team is running with the ball towards the enemy's goal. You can hear the crowd go wild, like, "Wah!" If you take that away, the moment doesn't feel nearly as powerful. But as soon as you hear like, "Wah!" It's like, oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Another game that you worked on is Bleak Sword. What kind of game is that?
Bleak Sword. I hope I get the okay pass of saying this. It's like a top-down Dark Souls game. Dark Souls being this fantasy game series. I hope all of you and the listeners know the game because it's actually pretty good. But yeah, so this super hard game, and this specific game, Bleak Sword, has like kind of an oddly minimalistic graphic style, but at the same time, no. It's like black and white in color, but it has small 3D elements here and there, and it's just a very stylized packet. But when I saw it, my first idea was this. For some reason in my head, this is kind of a 70s C-movie feeling thing. There was something about it that I wanted it to sound very distorted and kind of in your face and have something visceral, but I didn't want to kind of make it like a basic action game with like, you know, these very pristine, clear hit sounds and stuff. Instead, I wanted to make the game mostly with my mouth, the sounds. So when you hit something, it's like, this is potentially loud, by the way. So you hit something, it's like, kind of that kind of stuff. When you hear it like that, it's visceral, but at the same time, you're like, is that a mouth? What is that? That's organic. It's something, it's tangible and real. That's kind of what I wanted, and I would distort the hell out of that. The game actually became a study in distortion for me because I would have a distortion effect and another one and a third one and maybe like 8 distortion effects after each other. And when I go like into that stuff, it just comes out very crumbly and nasty. So yeah, that's Bleak Sword.
Did you tell the game designers about your first idea with using a lot of mouth sounds?
Yeah. I mean, I always do a design document and I always present that and we go through the design and then we can still tweak stuff and I would like do a small sound demo. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Like when I work on start working on games, quite often I do a small demo on top of the game just so we know that we are all on the same page. Like I would do something like I would capture gameplay and do sounds on top of the video. So we kind of get a feeling of what the game would be like, roughly. So that's like good time to go like, no, we want this, we want that.
How often do you find the right style or the right idea right away? And how often do you need to prototype and work your way into it and find the style?
That's a good question, but very hard to answer. Usually I do stick to my gut feeling of the first design, but that first design might kind of mutate and evolve during making the game.
Yeah.
That's kind of the normal scenario. But sometimes there might be a game where I've done the design, I start working with that, and then midway the game we are like, oh no, this is not it. And then I start kind of changing the design. I need to kind of ponder on things, what works, what doesn't. Then I would kind of gather a list for myself. These things worked. Why? These things didn't work. Why? And I would kind of make a small encyclopedia for myself of why the sounds aren't working in this game and why they are. And then I would kind of start to steer the ship towards the observed good stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
But it's always different. Always different.
Okay, let's try a sound from Bleak Sword here. Oh my god.
Ooh, they're really loud.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of mouth sounds and metal. That's one of the bosses dying. I would say half of the sounds here are made by mouth and just blasted through copious amounts of distortion. And then I would have like metal, because you would have knights with armor. So that was like the armor sound, but all the kind of punch and like entrails coming out, that's all mouth sounds.
It's cool because it's very minimalistic in graphics, but then you can describe what's happening with the sound. Like you said, with the entrails coming out.
Yeah.
It's not shown in the game, but you can hear them.
Yeah, that's actually another thing, which was actually kind of weird. It worked for me and against me, because one of the first kind of retro games similar to Bleak Sword was Nuclear Throne. And people expected something different from the sounds. They were like, looks like a 16-bit game or whatever, like pixel game. And they were expecting these like chiptune sounds. But for that game, I mean, I like chiptune sounds just as the other person, but I didn't feel right. There was just not enough punch and detail in the sounds that I wanted in this example for Bleak Sword. So when seeing the things, I didn't want to do the pixely thingy or the chiptune thingy. I wanted more detail. I wanted more visceral stuff, but I didn't want it to be modern. That's why the 70s C-movie feel came into play. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of retro, but in a different way.
Cool.
Let's listen to some sounds to see like how many different kind of sounds you can make with your mouth.
That was not a mouth sound.
The last one was not a mouth sound, but the other ones were, right?
Yeah.
The first growl, was that also the deep one? Was that also you?
Yeah. All of them.
Yeah, that one.
Is that a really stretched out sound there?
Yeah, it's pitched down. And I believe that sound was, I would do like the voice into a small spring drum. So you have a drum with a spring attached to it, but I took the spring off. Well, it actually broke. And I would use that drum like a chassis for my voice. So now I'm just talking like this normally. Now I'm going to put my hands around my mouth as a pipe. Suddenly my sound is very different than like this. So if you take different objects, like now I'm going to take a coffee mug. So I'm talking, and now a coffee mug, talking, it's different. So I've used that a lot. Especially in Bleak Sword, I would take like different objects and place them in front of my mouth, and I would record the kind of resonance of the object. And if you pitch that down, you can make your sound like what kind of an animal ever, and so on and so on and so on. It's really fun to experiment with.
And what was this?
That was a morning when I didn't make the lavatories in time. No. That's no, that's I chose that sound to send you because it was kind of a fun thing to make rain sounds with. Because sometimes when it rains outside and you record that, you get a lot of unwanted noise, and it's just kind of sometimes a bit unbearable. So with Bleak Sword, I came up with the idea of using a water planter. You put water in this thing. What's it called in English? Oh no. But you pour water into flowers, and you can have this like muzzle to it that makes it into a shower. Yeah. I would use that on top of different objects to make controlled rain. The more I tip it, the harder the rain is. So I could have rain that I could control. And that was kind of fun and interesting find.
I'm going to listen to that. It will be more fun to water the flowers the next time I will do it, when I have one of those.
Yeah, and like try sometimes if you have like a backyard balcony or something, or in the shower, like take, let's say, a cardboard sheet and put that and pour the water on top of that, and it sounds like almost like a forest floor, or like leaves being rained on, stuff like that.
Huh. So I was thinking, when you work with game designers, you get some directions for what kind of sounds you're going to make. What is good directions? What kind of directions do you like to get?
Wow. Let's see. Again, this is really different per project, but I personally might sound very narcissistic, but when I made my own game, Tormentor X Punisher, I did this to the other people too. Like, I really enjoy when people hire people to do their thing. Just to rudely pitch my own video game, Tormentor X Punisher, also published by Raw Fury. Get it on Steam or whatever platform. So in that game, I had a programmer and graphics artists and stuff, and I just told everyone, hey, do your thing. And that's the best thing, I feel like. Just scout the person's work. Let's say you want to get a sound designer. check what they worked on before. See if that sound designer feels like the right kind of a person or a potentially right kind of a person. So you might have people who just haven't worked on that specific kind of a game, but they might be really good at it. Check that you enjoy their vibe, and as people you have like good chemistry between you. Let them do their thing. That's the best thing. But then when you have like the right person, let's say I jump in the project, they want me to do my thing, then I would ask for stuff like, okay, what happens in the game? Let's say like the player character. What does the player character do? And if the game designer can tell me in, let's say, like bullet points, okay, you can walk. Cool. Can I jump? Yes, you can jump. You can double jump. We have different materials you can land on. Getting all this info will just make the process faster and less confusing along the way. Details are what I think is important, or what the setting of the game is, what your inspirations were and stuff like that, just so you get everyone on board properly, kind of as fast as possible, so they can actually start designing and trying out stuff.
But when you're starting a project, how far has the game gotten at that point normally? I mean, I would guess that you would want to see like graphics and know a little bit more about the game so you can decide on what you want to do with it, so to say.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the best time. In the past, I've always said, hey, as soon as possible, which I still believe. But sometimes like budget reality comes into play and just can't have someone sitting around for like 2-3 months. But yeah, indeed, the best time is when you actually have something that you can play. You can see the actions in action.
Yep.
And, you know, you can get a sense of the game. Also being in projects that have been day zero, and then I've just asked for like concept arts or any prototypes or any sketches so I can get some kind of a grip of what we are working on.
Yeah.
But I mean, every project is different. And like, I would say maybe 80-90% of the games I work on, they are like a game that they've been already making for a year or something. And the first thing I do is like, I don't know how to budget the game, so I would ask for a sound list. So list everything that needs sound in the game, in your opinion. And then they would write like, okay, player sounds. And I would get that. I'm like, player sounds? What are the sounds for the player? Walking, jumping, swimming, driving a car. Oh, you have cars. Do you have other vehicles? And so on and so on. Just like listing everything. So you can see what needs to be done and you can price that easy. Well, easy and easy. It's always hard.
Do you ever use the same exact sound?
No. Okay, there's a double answer. If I make a sound for a game, I will never use that in any other game, except if it's a sequel for the game or something like that. But source sounds, kind of the sounds that I've recorded out of which I can build other sounds out of, those I might and definitely use between projects, unless it's specifically made for a project.
But isn't that a classic in movies that there is some scream that is used in hundreds of movies?
Wilhelm scream, yeah.
And other effects as well, I guess.
Yeah, and that's super boring. So, like to me personally, like if someone else does it and enjoys it, I mean, go for it. It's entertainment. In honesty, who gives a thing? But for me personally, that's one of my biggest things. Even before I did sounds for games or movies or anything, I hated that. Like if I played a game and I heard a sound from another game, it would just break immersion. Like I would be like, oh, that's the bear from World of Warcraft. That's the bear from Skyrim. Like, oh, it's the same bear. Like just. I understand recording bears is a process, but.
Have you ever made a sound for a bear?
Yeah. I've never recorded a bear, but I pretended to be a bear.
That's the way to go.
Yeah,
that's the way to go.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty satisfied. Gustav, is there something we should add, you think?
Many of the games that you have worked on are very fast-paced and a lot of sounds playing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that the player hears the most important sounds?
That's a good question. So there's, again, multiple answers, but like when designing the actual sounds, like before actually creating sound, designing it, something that I personally like to do is trying to find ways to distinguish, let's say, the player sounds and enemy sounds. And for instance, in Nuclear Throne, I would use a different microphone and even a different sound card to create the enemy sounds with than the player sounds. So they are already from the very source, they are created with a different recording setup. So they sound automatically slightly different. They feel slightly different. something like that helps to kind of give the players familiarity. This is how the enemies feel like. This is how the player feels like. There's a slight difference.
Yeah.
And one thing is not to make the sound field kind of like mud, like very, million things happening. The shorter your sounds are, the more focus you can give. So let's say an enemy shouting, it doesn't need to be 20 seconds of "Rrr." You can just have like "Rrr." And when you hear like 20 of those, it's nicer than and you're like, oh, who's screaming? So it's like small things like that. And one thing is to not have too much bass in sounds. Instead, like I mentioned earlier, doing like a small sound that contains the bass information. Like that, the mix becomes easier and less crowded.
Yeah.
Like the more bass you have, the more energy it needs for your speakers to push air and stuff like that. So if you have just too much bass, your speakers are just looking at you like, hey, come on, there's too much work.
But if there's a lot of sounds playing at the same time because there's a lot of things happening, are you giving them all equal bandwidth, or I don't know the word to use?
There's multiple ways, but the easiest thing is another thing called priorities, like priority system. So let's say we can only play 20 sounds in parallel, like at the same time. So you can give like, these sounds are more important than these sounds. If these two sounds clash together, play the more important one and leave out the less important one. You can do stuff like that. Or when an important sound plays, it lowers the volume of the least important ones. So you can do like small tricks like that. And a lot of games do that. It's trickery, it's magic, and it works, and it's fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, very. Is there anything you want to add, Jonas, from your part?
Yeah, I'm excited to be working on a Swedish game currently. I can't really talk about it, but it's going to be fun. So I'm working on this game called Go Mecha Ball.
Yeah, we had Jakob on just a couple of weeks ago here.
Yeah.
I know what the game looks like, but I haven't heard what it sounds like. So that's going to be really cool to hear in the future.
It's really interesting for me personally. We have great terms working on it. I have a few other kind of hobby projects on the side, but this is like my main thing that I'm working on for the foreseeable future. And it's interesting. It's something new to me as well. Most probably it'll be my most deepest project so far, and I'm super excited about it.
Nice.
Cool. Looking forward to that.
It's a team of talented people. It's a privilege and honor to work with these people.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for your time, Jonas, and Gustav as well. It was really fun talking to you guys.
Thanks. Likewise.
Thank you.